new tax law, which starts on the first day in January. I have right here in the studio to help us dissect that Mr. Oladejo Adeyemi is the Associate Director, Commercial Practice at Anderson, Nigeria. Mr. Adeyemi, good morning and welcome to the program.
Morning, Nini, and thanks for having me.
Good to have you. So I'm sure in your interactions, you've been hearing of some controversies. What are some of those most controversial areas you've heard about?
Okay, there have been quite a number of them. I think generally Nigerians are just uncomfortable with the fact that a lot of things are changing. It's the first time we're having this level of overall, over our taxing framework. So with all of those changes, I mean, it's just kind of expected that there would be concerns, that quotas will raise. But I think topmost in the list of those is, of course, as you would expect, the ones that would affect the SMEs, it's the fact that tax identification and tax ID registration and all of that, So that part has really been concerning for a lot of people, especially where people have heard that the banks are going to be having reporting obligations and you may not be able to do certain transactions except you are tax registered.
Okay, so you are a professional, yeah? So you will help us clear some of these misgivings, because when you talk to Mr. Taiwo Oyedele and he talks to you about some of these changes, it's supposed to be for the good of the small businesses and small salary earners. So one would wonder, and he's shared experience of how he's been harassed, and when he explains some of those things to such individuals, they switch to the other side. So I believe you have full knowledge of some of this. You're going to be one of those, who,
Absolutely.
Exactly. So when you talked about the small businesses, I mean, let's not just follow. I know we have a list, but let's just do it from how it goes. The small businesses and the issue of the tax identification number. How is this supposed to work? What is new?
You see, in Nigeria, there has always been the law, and there's always been what people believe to be the law, right? So that belief may be kind of more even important than the fine prints and the fine details of the law. And you cannot blame the people. When Taiwo said, they are turning his words around and all of that, you have deepened level of mistrust in the nation, where you've seen promises given over and over, and those promises have not been kept. So with the people, it's just like, you're pouring new wine.
Again.
Exactly, new wine into the old wine. So it really doesn't matter what you are saying. People believe this thing you are saying is not going to be for our ultimate benefit. But to get to the answer to the question that you've raised, now, if you are a small business, for instance, what the government had thought to do is, before now, even currently, because the new law is going to kick effect by 1st of January. Currently, if your revenue is 25 million, right, you do not have, your tax rate is going to be 0%.
25 million a quarter?
25 million naira for an annum, per annum, for a whole year, currently. So you have 2 weeks for that to subsist, right? From 1st of January, that threshold, I mean, speaking about the good that the government has done, that has not really been well understood. That threshold has been pushed to 50 million, 100 million, depending on the tax law.
I thought it was 100 million, 25 a quarter.
There's a little challenge with that, and I'll tell you where.
So those are the little prints which the people are afraid of.
You see, the Nigeria Tax Act, which is the principal act, says 50 million.
50 million, please, how many quantify? 50 million an annum.
Per annum.
Okay. So if you are the threshold of below 50 million an annum, right now, by 1st of January, you don't pay any tax.
Exactly. And in doing so, that law says small company, right? Then Nigeria Tax Administration Act, which should give you details of tax affair, returns, and all of that, in defining small business, then says 100 million. So there are two major thresholds. You are looking at the revenue threshold and you're looking at your asset quantum. The quantum of the asset should also not be more than 250 million. Both laws agree on the 250 million part, right? Whether it's small company or small business, semantics, right? But the first one, which is Nigeria Tax Act, says 50 million, and Nigeria Tax Administration Act says 100 million. So I think that must have just been final error, alignments, changes, and so however you look at it, whether you're saying 50 million or 100 million, you are safe. But the fact remains that it's been moved from 25 million to that much. So look at that. That is like doubling or even quadrupling, the threshold that currently subsists. That's a good thing. There's no way that should not earn the government something good, right? But the fact remains that even when it was 25 million, there was an obligation to still file returns. You're not going to pay taxes, but declare that this is the much you've made. That obligation it's not new. It has always been in the law, at least since the time of the Finance Act. But you've got citizens and individuals that have become used to doing their thing regardless of what the law says. Why? Because, tax is a social contract, right? I pay my taxes with the expectation that the government is going to fix certain things for me. Over the years, citizens have been, so it's not new. So when Taiwo said it's been harassed, people, it should really not come as a surprise, because citizens are used to doing some of these things themselves over the years, So it's like one side of the contract had not been fulfilled. So now you're coming with the big stick, listening
and the threat of real enforcement.
Exactly. So people,
that there'll be no leakage.
People are not looking at the good that you really intended. They are looking at, finally, they want to forcefully drag me into this net. That's what is causing the contention. But in terms of what the law has done, the law is recognizing the fact that you're a small business. I don't want to encumber you with the administrative burden of certain things just yet. While you are growing the business, focus on growing the business, and I'm going to tax you only at 0%.
Okay, so when we now talk about, having that compulsorily active tax identification number, it's just because the government wants to follow up on your activities and ensure that you're reporting, even when you're paying 0% of tax. So it doesn't mean that, because I've heard that from January now, even if you do a transfer, you need to put, even if it's 25,000 naira, you have to put it, or else you'll be asked to pay tax and all of that. And I did ask Mr. Oyedele that, and he told me that yes, there's going to be more scrutiny.
Absolutely.
Of all those transfers.
Absolutely.
But the threshold is actually 25 million naira.
Exactly.
So if banks want to follow up with 25,000 naira and 5,000 naira, I wonder how many staff they will need, to follow up with all of that.
In some of the things that are now gaining popularity, are the things that should have come up in the past. The fact that you want to do transfer, the nomenclature of the transaction should be clear. It's not something that anybody should be saying by now. You are doing business, right? And if what you are doing is a business transaction, you should be able to say, this is what this is, so that when push comes to shove, at any point in time, you can always refer to what precisely that transaction was. But remember what I said, citizens have become comfortable. It's like there's an agreement that, I'm not going to bother you, right? Don't bother me as well. I won't bother you with the amenities. I'm going to fix my power, my light, and all of that. My road, even in some instances, myself, my security to a large extent. And don't also bother me with taxes. So the SMEs have gotten used to not doing anything over the period. So now when you're saying, before you're able to operate your bank, you would need your tax ID, then a lot of people become kind of uncomfortable to say,
because we don't know what it will look like, what changes exactly. It will come
But
with
the catch really in it is that the taxing regime still requires you as an individual or as a corporate, to declare. So the regime is still based on self-assessment. So nobody is going to go into your bank. I've heard all sorts. People have set up ring lights to say all manners of things. Nobody is going to go into your bank account and say, this 100 million you have or this 30 million, this is your tax, I'm taking it. That is never going to happen. If that happens, then that is not in line with the provisions of any law.
So we also had in battle, that's Mr. Oyedele, that's VAT revenue allocation with the politicians, and he was faced with the reality of political power and political will.
You need that to another good thing, because if you look at what obtained, before 1st of January and what currently subsists, what has changed now is that the sharing formula has been even more explicitly defined, with the federal government now getting reduced share of 10%, the state government and the FCT, getting 55%, and then the local government getting 35%. And it doesn't stop there, nothing can be clearer than what we currently have, because now the portions of the state and the local government would then be further, stripped to certain, using certain principles like equality. 50% of that quantum is going to be further shared equally, 20% is going to be shared based on population contribution, right? And 30% is going to be shared based on consumption. So if the VAT is actually consumed in your state, right, it means you're going to get more. If you are a state of X population, it's going to impact what comes to you, as opposed to what we had before, where it's just blatant. So you can have a particular state, which was the bane for the agitation at the time. Those were the challenges that he faced and his committee faced at the time this law was, in the works. Because a state like Lagos, for instance, we say, oh, all of the, activities are happening here. I shouldn't be getting, the same vote with
as one quiet
state that is, that is not really doing activity. Yeah. So those are the issues. So those things, again, that's another good that has been done, explicitly defined, properly broken down to show that, there are certain principles that should guide these things and not just based on collective, contribution and then just let everybody feel good, which was
but it seems like this good will hardly be appreciated because of that lack of trust, which you talk about. And I think that even though it seems to be outside the purview of the presidential committee, but ensuring that, yes, I'll pay my tax, but can you assure me that my tax will be used as it's supposed to be? You said it's a social contract.
Absolutely.
It's a two-way thing. Now You're ensuring that I report my earnings, whether I'm paying tax or not. At least when I get to the threshold, then I can start paying tax. But who are you following up to ensure that those monies are being used for what they ought to do? And I'm not still sourcing for funds to do my road and my electricity and all that.
That's the second bit of, that's the other end of the stick, right? And you see what the government is also aware that the trust threshold is kind of low, because now, other than the Taiwo committee, the fiscal reform committee, the government had newly set up another committee, called the National Tax Policy Implementation Committee. That committee is also supposed to galvanize stakeholders, ensure that implementation is smooth. It's headed by Joseph Tegbe, and of course, it's going to be working hand in hand with the committee that bathed, the tax laws in itself. So I believe that some of those initiatives are to address some of those yearnings. So you can expect that the mistrust is not going to disappear suddenly. It will be.
But if we smell the political will to block those leakages, I know it will help a lot. Thank you so much.
With you completely.
Thank you so much, Associate Director, Commercial Practice, Anderson, Nigeria, Mr. Oladejo Adeyemi. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me.